Welcome back to another video, and this one is about model forms, and in this video I'm going to show you how I fill out a electrical installation certificate. So let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the BS7671 2018 model form, which is available as a free download from the IET. Simply just go to Google, type in IET model forms, and you can download this PDF absolutely free of charge. So we'll start off, just come down the page, and what I've done is I've filled this in as a typical rewire of a dwelling, as I would do in the field. So first of all, I've got details of client. Obviously I'm not using real people, real signatures, that sort of thing. It's just purely a mock-up for demonstration purposes. So first of all, we start off with the customer's name and the address of whoever's ordering the work. Then the installation address. Obviously the two things can be very different. In the description extent of installation, we don't need anything too over the top in here. Rewire of dwelling is sufficient enough just to tell people what it is that we've done, a quick overview. And then underneath, extent of installation covered by this certificate. So it's a rewire of a semi-detached dwelling, new consumer unit installed, split load, 12-way Wilex, 3 ways on each side used. So that pretty much covers all things really, in as much as I'm giving a description of what it is that I've done. I'm saying I've used 3 ways, and I've got a 12-way Wilex board, and it's not essential to put this information on, but it helps if you ever come back to the job and you know what manufacturer it is that you've actually installed, so you can carry the spurs. A quick look at the certificate will tell you that information. A lot of people don't put it on, but I think it's a good idea. Next, moving along here, alteration to an existing installation. So because we've rewired the circuitry, it's not a new installation. It's not an addition to an existing. It's really classed as an alteration to an existing because we've taken out all the old stuff. Not applicable in the continuation sheet, and down here it's been amended to Amendment 1 2020, so I've put that date in there. Details of departures, none. Details of permitted exemptions, none. Where possible, try and fill in these blanks and at least put something in there, just to make sure that you're telling your customer that there are none, if there are any departures or not. Obviously that's not my signature, but I'm just using this for demonstration purposes. So you sign the box there, today's date, and obviously print your name in capitals if you can. Got myself down as designer number 1. Unless there's a designer number 2, you don't need to fill that information in. It's not applicable in this case. Clearly, if I was doing the design or the construction, I would only sign the bit that's relevant to me. So if somebody else has done the design, that's where they would sign. And likewise for the inspecting and testing or the construction on this particular form. Now, I'm using the model form because it's a common thing that's out there. It's available free to download. Obviously there are lots of other forms. There's own branded forms, Test Instrument Solutions, QTech forms, NAPIT, NIC, whatever it is that you use. They're all slightly different, but the information is generic from these model forms. So just bear that in mind, guys, that all the information on all the other forms is come or derived from this one particular form. And again, down at the bottom, put my name in, date, and sign in the appropriate places. Next, we cross out, and it's a recommended date of the installation, and the designer is normally responsible for when the inspection is to take place in the future. And for this instance, I've just put 10 years, and just delete which one is appropriate to you. Moving down, it's not necessary to keep putting the same information in. Again, just save yourself some time. I've put designer number 1, my name, address, postcode, telephone number, your company name, and not applicable for designer number 2. And then in there, rather than repeating the information, it's perfectly acceptable to say as per designer 1 in both cases. I'm using a typical earthing arrangement, which is TNCS. We've got AC and one phase 2 wire ticked. There is no DC. This is a bit that people seem to get a bit confused over: nature of supply parameters and nominal voltage. What you've got to think of, guys, is, or just remember, is U is line to line and UO is line to earth voltage, and of course in this country it's 230. Nominal frequency is 50 Hertz, and if you read the notes down here, it says by inquiry or measurement. Prospective fault current 0.657 kiloamps, and again, if I was to inquire at the utility company, because I've got a TNCS, they would quote me 0.35. If you take your 230 volt, divide it by 0.35, you come up with a fault current of 0.657. So I've just used that as a benchmark. Supply protective device, BS883 is exactly the same as a 1361 Type 2, rated at 100 amp, and I've just made a note there, by inquiry. Moving down the page, distributors facilities ticked, maximum demand. Again, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of that, it's part of a separate video, but 60 amps on average. It will vary depending on the size of the property. And details of earth electrode if applicable, so I've just put NA in there. Earthing conductor, copper, 16mm, that's your main earth from your main earth terminal block, and your main protective bonding, 10mm, again it's copper. Water installation pipes have been checked and verified, and the same with the gas. Obviously, if you've got any oil or structural steel, you'd tick the appropriate ones, and don't forget to verify that there's actually a connection as well. Moving down, main switch fuse, circuit breaker or RCD, location is in the hallway. A BSEN 609473 is a double pole isolator, which is usually your main switch, which is either black or red in colour, or depending on which board manufacturer it is, and it's usually a 2-pole device. Current rating 100 amps, fuse rating or setting 100 amps, and voltage rating is 240. That's actually embossed on the side of the isolator. It's not the supply voltage or nominal voltage, it's actually the rating of the device. Obviously, if you're using an RCD as a main switch, you would put the RCD trip current times and the operating current in there. And comments on existing installation, again, try not to leave it blank, and I've just put none to note. And it's made up of 3 parts, this. It's actually an electrical installation certificate, a schedule of inspections, and a schedule of test results. So it's a 3-part certificate, guys, just remember that. Moving down to the old favourite schedule of inspections, it's very difficult to sort of say, right, this is the box to tick. I say quite often when I'm trying to educate people as to what to fill in on these, this is where people get a lot of what I call tick blindness. So they'll tick a box quite neatly at the top, and as they work their way to the bottom, it becomes one continuous long line, and you'll probably know what I mean by that when you come to fill these in, because obviously you've got a couple of pages of it. But it's really important not to tick things that are not applicable, such as parallel arrangements for generating sets, that sort of thing. And I'll just zoom in a little bit so we can see that a little bit more clearly. So adequate arrangements for generating sets at the public supply, automatic disconnection of supply, so distribution earthing arrangements, installation electrode. The number of times you see these that are ticked. Well, on a TNCS you wouldn't have an earth electrode because that forms part of a TT system. So just make sure you're only ticking what is appropriate for that installation. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because obviously every single job is vastly different. And again, a couple of things to note down here: AFDDs, arc fault detection device. You're only going to have a warning notice if you've got one that's present. This is just based loosely around an installation that you would generally come across day to day. So again, emergency switching would only be applicable if you've got emergency switching. The number of times that firefighter switches are actually ticked when they're not even present is unbelievable. Don't forget to sign and print and date at the bottom of that. That's why you have to do it in the different parts, because it's actually a 3-part certificate. Moving along down to the bottom, I've done 2 circuits just to highlight what you need to put into these boxes. At the top we have DB reference number, so I'll call this CU1 or for consumer unit 1, but you can make it whatever you want, and applicable to the job that you're actually doing. We've got location under the stairs. Again, you know, you get people putting things in there in the house or at the back of the yard or something like that. Try and be a little bit more specific about it. And on this sheet here, this is actually where we've took a measurement of ZS or ZDB, which is basically the ZE in this case at that one particular board. It then becomes a ZS if there's additional boards and so on. We won't go into too much detail with it. We'll try and keep it as straightforward as possible. So that'd be your ZE reading, the measured reading, and the prospective fault current. And again, it will vary depending on which job it is that you're doing and the supply characteristics. So correct supply polarity confirmed, don't forget to tick there. Details of circuits and or installed equipment vulnerable to damage when testing. This is something that people tend not to fill in or fill in a lot of detail, but again, LED lights, neons, smoke detectors, RCDs, USB sockets, that sort of thing, smoke detectors, emergency lights. You know, they're all common things that you will find in certain dwellings, but not applicable to all, but just list what's applicable to your job. Over here again, people don't read things. It says state serial number and or asset numbers. If you've only got one tester, why put the serial number in unless you have to do? I've got an MFT 1711, so that's all I put. MFT 1711, and I put speech marks in between each one to indicate that it's the same machine that I'm using because I've only got the one machine. Moving down to the actual test results, I've just got a couple here for you to have a look at. So I've just filled two in, a couple of slight differences which I will explain. Kitchen ring main 60898 B-type, rated obviously 32 amp, breaking capacity 6k or 6000 amps. Again, it's a sort of separate video really to describe all these, just giving you an overview of what to fill in. I'm making an assumption here that you already have the basic understanding of what to put in these boxes. RCD 30 milliamps, maximum permitted ZS. I'm using 80% values, which are in BS7671 on-site guide. Reference method clip direct. Size of cable 2.5 by 1.5 because we're using a flat twin and earth. If it's a ring main, obviously we need to fill these boxes in. So we've got small R1, small Rn, which should be the same if all things are equal, and our R2, which is 0.50, and our large R1, R2, which is 0.20. Obviously, we won't only fill out one of these boxes. It's all required to do. We're not required to do an R2 test on both sides if we're not if we've already done our R1, R2, I should say. Insulation resistance test voltage 500 volts for this particular circuit, and we'll see why the bottom one's different in a second. Live to live, live to earth insulation resistance. So this is generic in as much as it could be live to live or it's live to neutral. For the purpose of the certificate, we're classing the neutral as a live conductor. So it's 999. Notice I haven't put greater than or plus. It's not something I do as a matter of course. Again, it's down to you whether you put it. I'm not in favour really of inferring that my tester can measure higher than its maximum permissible value. So in other words, if my machine can register up to 999 megaohms, I'm not going to indicate on there by use of a greater than or a plus symbol that it is actually measured more than what it is capable of doing. Polarity is just a tick in the box. Measured value for ZS or highest measured value, again, it's something according to BS7671 we can calculate. Maximum disconnection time 23 milliseconds for our RCD. RCD test button is obviously pressing the test button, and if it's applicable, AFDDs. Now as we come over here, any remarks? None on that particular circuit, but if you see underneath, I've got USB sockets connected. And then we come back over here. The only difference is here is this is a radial circuit at 20 amp. Obviously the maximum ZS is different. Moving along, we're not required to put anything in for ring continuity. And all we're required to do is an R1, R2 test for continuity. So the others are blank. You can either put NA or a dash in there. And in this case, I've tested at 250 volts. And the reason being is because we're allowed by BS 7671 to use a reduced voltage if we've got something in circuit that isn't practicable to disconnect for testing purposes. And in some machines, I'm not saying all, but sometimes if you reduce the voltage, the maximum insulation resistance value reduces as well, which is what I'm showing here as an indication. Again, polarity is checked at the ZS stage and at your R1, R2 stage. So you would test it twice, once dead and once live, and put a tick in the appropriate box. Because it's on the same RCD side, the reading there of the disconnection time, and it's the 5 times test that we're interested in mostly, so it's 23 milliseconds, and again RCD test operation. Once you've tested it once, you don't have to keep testing it over and over and over again. It's perfectly fine to test it just the once and repeat the readings, and I normally do that at the board. In all honesty, I'll be 100% with you guys. I test it at the board rather than remote, and I test it with everything isolated. And the reason why I do that is because I'm not going to get any leakage or anything off any existing circuits that's going to interfere with any of my readings. And moving on to the last one again, if we've got arc fault detection devices, then you would put the reading in there of the manual operation, so it would be a tick or not applicable as the case is on this one. And that's pretty much it, all I've got for you today. Hope you enjoyed the overview of the installation certificate. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up, like the video, and I'll see you on the next one.